All right guys, on today's field tips, we're gonna take a look at how to field dress a really fat cow elk. All right, so I've got my assistant here, Mr. Finn Hayes. He helped me with the tracking job, and we found this cow up in a real steep draw here. Luckily, it's not too hot today. It's definitely not cold. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and just split this hide right down the backbone. Now, if I was worried about keeping the hide, I would cut her down the belly and then across out the legs like this and just peel the hide off like that. But like I said, I'm not worried about that, so we're gonna split it down the back. So because I had help to start with, we went ahead and just busted through the right-hand side of this elk so that Chuck could get on his way back to camp with a load of meat. And then I had him help me roll this elk over, and we're gonna pick this video up on the left-hand side. So when you're cutting around these legs, you want to cut down below the knee so that you can cut the knee off and you're not going to have to deal with the hide. But to cut these things off, just make a kind of scribe around them. And I'm going to use a different knife for that so I don't dull my skinning knife. And when you make the cut, you're going to cut a ton of hair doing that. So make sure that you brush all that stuff off. So you'll notice when I'm cutting this thing, I'm always cutting from the inside out, except for when I cut around the legs like that. One of the reasons that I do that is because you cut a lot less hair than if you're cutting like this. The other reason is if you're cutting from the outside in, you're gonna cut down into the meat, you're gonna shove all that hair in there, and if you're working on the area where the guts are, you're much more likely to cut through there and puncture something that you don't want to. So I'm gonna take this cut up the leg, all the way down the shoulder and meet it up with the spine. I'm gonna do the same thing with the back leg, and then we're gonna peel this middle section, peel this neck off, peel the back off, and that's gonna expose our shoulder, all of our ribs, our back strap, and our ham back here. All right, so I've got this cut all the way down the leg, all the way to the spine. I've got the same thing going on back here, and I've got the hide cut right there along the spine. Now I need to get down here and just start pulling this back. All right, so we've got all the hide removed from the top side of this animal towards the front end anyway, and we're ready to go ahead and remove this shoulder. Now, there is nothing really significant that's attaching the shoulder to the body. It's just ligaments and muscles. And so all you've got to do, actually I got a little bit of hide here left to go. Put that up on my leg, get rid of that. All right, so to remove the shoulder, all you've got to do is pull it back, and you see all this muscle here that's connected to the brisket down here. Just want to cut that, and I like to stay close to the ribs and keep as much meat on this shoulder as possible. Just makes it easier for packing. Put a little bit of pressure on it back like this and start cutting against those ribs. Anywhere that muscle and tendon attaches to it, and this shoulder is just gonna fall right off. Now when you get down close to the backbone, be careful because it's easy to cut into the back strap back here. Now this is a lot easier if you have somebody to help you, but my help took off with a load of meat, so I'm on my own. But put a little bit of pressure to it and just keep on cutting, and you can see you'll eventually see the back strap. Now you don't want to drop this thing in the dirt. Fold it over here. Do this last remaining thing back here so we don't get dirt all over it. There we go, that should be disconnected and ready to go into a game bag. All right, now again, you don't need a saw to cut these legs off. There's a knuckle just below the knee right here. So if you scribe around this thing, you can pop this thing off with just a knife. Get it into a little bit of a bind. There we go. You can do the same thing to the hind legs too. I'll show you how here in a little bit. All right, so this is ready to be hung up. All right, so I'm back here at the back leg. I've got the tendon here so I can still hang it. Now, to cut this one off, you go down and you can kind of feel where this knuckle stops. And you just want to take your knife, go right around that, cut through that big tendon on the back. Once you've got it scribed, you should just be able to pop it right off of there like that. And now you've still got a good handle here for moving this thing around. I'm about ready to pull this hind quarter off of here. We got the other quarter off when I had help, but my help took off with a load of meat, so I'm by myself. So for you guys that hunt by yourself, which I do normally, I just had some help packing this one out. This is going to be a good tutorial for you. Getting the back hams off is not difficult, but it's not nearly as easy as getting the front shoulder off. So what connects this thing is a bunch of muscle and tendon really tight to the pelvis, and then there's the ball joint, and inside that ball joint there's a tendon that runs right through the middle of it and connects into that socket in the pelvis. So we're going to find that. Now sometimes it can be hard to see because when you cut through, there's a major artery that runs through there, and when you cut through that, blood goes everywhere unless the animal's been sitting for a while. And so it can make things difficult to see, but I'm going to try to show it to you as best I can. So the first thing we need to do is just lift this back and just start cutting. Anywhere you see muscle attaching, and right here's a good one. That's a big muscle attaching to the bottom side of the pelvis right there. Now the joint is right here. Okay, so keep your eyes right there in that spot. This is where that artery is going to be, so I'm going to try to avoid cutting that until we get this joint cut. You can see it, you can kind of see it start to open it up right there. And I just cut the tendon in the middle of it. And here's the ball head right here, and here's the socket. All right, I'm going to go ahead and have to cut this artery, so this thing's going to lay back. Now I will tell you, like right up in this area, you've got paunch right here. So be careful with your knife, because if you nick the wrong area, there's a lot of pressure in here, especially with this elk, with her butt downhill. If I make a cut right here through the abdominal wall, you're just going to get small intestine coming out, and it's going to get all in your work area here. And even though you might not have cut that small intestine and get gut matter all over everything, it's just going to make things a lot more difficult. So try to avoid that. There's a lot of connected, like really tough tendons and connective tissues right around that ball socket. So once you start cutting that, this ham's just gonna lay back. And you'll find that a big flat bone right here, just keep your knife along that bone and just keep trimming, working your way towards the top or the spine back here, tailbone. And you'll eventually get this ham free. Now the trick is getting this thing up without getting dirt all over it. You're by yourself. Got it. All right, so I'm ready to remove this neck meat now. There's really not a lot of neck meat on a cow. On a bull, there's a ton. There's probably, on a big bull, I bet there's 40 pounds of neck meat. And neck meat really is, it's a lot better than a lot of people give it credit. If you cook it the right way, it's actually one of my favorite cuts, that and the shanks, believe it or not. But we're gonna go ahead and take the neck meat off of this cow. Now, it can be sometimes difficult to get the neck meat off because the vertebrae in there are almost like little crosses. There's little bones that stick off the side and there's some that stick off the top. And so you just kind of have to take your blade and navigate around all that stuff. And you can probably, off this cow, I don't know, I'll probably get maybe 10 pounds of neck meat. And you could either throw that in the grinder or just wrap it up and throw it in a Dutch oven, in the oven on like 280 to 300 for 4 or 5 hours. Put a little bit of red wine in there. It's good stuff. All right, let's get started with that. There's also back here, there's quite a bit of meat that was left that was under the shoulder. So we'll just go ahead and start with that. We'll just leave this all attached to the neck meat. There's no real science to this, not that I've found anyway. You're basically just finding that bone and keeping your blade as close to it as possible, just peeling that meat off. A lot of people leave this stuff in the woods, but man, that is a terrible, terrible waste. I know the coyotes got to eat, but man, this is some good stuff if you know how to cook it. So I've got down to that first cross piece, that bone that sticks up. Now I'm just gonna have to find the top of that and come to the back side of it. Go back down. There we go. It's probably a good 5 pounds off one side. There's a bunch of meat and fat covering the ribs. Some of it is actually pretty good if you want to grind it, but a lot of it is so mixed up with fat. Like there'll be a real thin layer of fat and there'll be a thin layer of meat and thin layer of fat. And you could take all that stuff and sit there and spend hours, you know, trimming it, and you'd probably end up with maybe a pound or two of meat off of an animal this size. I'm not even gonna worry about that. I'm just gonna take the majority of this stuff that's covering the ribs and lay it back. Now there is some stuff up here that I will take because it's, there's a little bit of fat mixed in with it, but it's mostly meat, and I'll just go into the grinder. Down here around the brisket's a good example of that. There's a good piece of brisket meat that can go into be cut up and put into the grinder. Make some good burger out of that. And just put that right here for the time being. Now all this stuff back here, I'm just gonna peel off. All right, so I've got her turned around a little bit here so you can better see what I'm gonna do to get this back strap out. Now, when we were moving her around and flipping her around and stuff, we got a bunch of dirt on this side. That's okay, because there's a membrane that covers the back strap. We're gonna take that off, and that's gonna expose the back strap and make it a whole lot easier to get out. So to do that, just come back here along the backbone and just make a cut. You don't wanna go all the way down, because if you do have dirt on it, you're gonna push that dirt down in there. Go from the inside out, just like you were doing on the skinning. Just go right down the edge of the backbone. And that membrane should just peel right off. Got a little bit there. And there should be a nice clean back strap underneath. And you might need to come here and just give it a little cut to help peel it back. So that you don't get dirt on everything. Now that's all that meat that I was telling you about with the layers of fat and muscle. I mean, it's not really worth messing with. There we go. All right, so now, got a little bit of dirt on it. Now our back strap is completely exposed, and we can go ahead and start working on removing that. Now we're gonna start by just taking our knife and running it right down the edge of the backbone. That's gonna be our first cut. And once you get down in there, you should be able to feel it tap, tap, tap along those ribs. You can hear it. All right, so now that we've got that cut made, since we removed this membrane, it makes the edge of the back strap right here really stand out. Actually got a little bit more membrane right here I'm gonna take off. But you should be able to, if you peel this membrane apart from the back strap, you should be able to run your fingers along in here and feel those ribs. Now what those ribs are gonna do is they're coming up along the edge of the chest, and they dip down below that back strap, and they're gonna hook into the bottom of the spine right here. And so what we can do is just take our knife and use those ribs as a guide and just kind of work our way down towards that spine, and that's gonna lay all that meat back and make that back strap come right out. Now, I will mention that back here, you get into the short ribs. The short ribs on a cow like this only stick out about that far, and so you can't really use them as a guide, because the back strap overlaps them just a little bit. It sticks out a little bit farther than the ribs do, and so just keep that in mind. Find the hip bone here, you can make a cut in front of that to free up the back end. It's one of the fattest elk I've ever seen. So just work it down all the way to the spine, all the way up, as far as you can go before you start trying to pull it out. Make things a whole lot easier on you. All right, so once you've got this cut and this cut made, there's usually just a little piece of meat right where the ribs meet the spine that's holding this thing in place. Now you just need to cut one end free. And it doesn't matter if it's the back or the front. And just start working that little piece of meat that's connecting it. And there you go. A whole bunch of steaks. The jays have found us. All right, so we've pretty much got this cow completely dismantled. I went ahead, I did take her heart out. We've got the neck meat, we've got the shoulders, the hams, back straps. I still have a tenderloin in here, and I'll show you how to get that. Now, I did want to mention the rib meat, the meat between the ribs. And so I'll get some of this, the meat between the ribs on the front here. Now I wouldn't hold it against you if you didn't get this, but I'm gonna go ahead and get it. Now, if you're gonna do this back here towards the back, you need to be real careful not to puncture those guts. But up here towards the front where the lungs are, you should be pretty safe. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get this tenderloin out of here. A lot of people confuse the backstrap with the tenderloin. The backstrap is not the tenderloin. Backstrap is the backstrap. Tenderloin is on the inside, and it's just below the short ribs right here. Now you can feel these ribs, these long ribs that wrap all the way around. You come to the back of those, and you get back in here, and those short ribs start right about in here. Now what I want to do is just cut right on the outside of these short ribs. Now when you do that, be very careful, because if you're not careful, you can cut the guts in there, and if you get gut matter all over your tenderloin, you might as well not even worry about it, because it's going to be ruined. So once you've got the abdominal wall, look at all that fat. She is a big old fat heifer. Once you've got that cut through, you should just be able to reach your hand back in there, and that piece of meat that you feel, that is the tenderloin. And it is a good piece of meat. Now to get this out, again, I'm going to be very careful not to puncture those guts. But you can take your knife, and just like you did the back strap, you can run it along the inside of these ribs. It's helpful if you keep your hand in there to keep your guts pushed back so you don't accidentally cut them. Ow. There we go. There's your tenderloin. Put that in the bag with the back straps so we don't grind it up by accident. All right, so I did a video a little while back talking about what I carry in my pack, and talked a little bit about this pack when I did that video, and then said I'll do a review on it later. Well, I guess this is a good opportunity to do a review on this pack. Because hauling meat is one of the reasons why I carry this pack. It's got a nice meat shelf, it's got a really rugged frame, but a lightweight frame. I think it's the lightest weight frame on the market, if I'm not mistaken. But it's built well enough that it can handle heavy loads. And so what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and take the bag off of this thing for right now. Not completely off, but I'm just gonna lay it back so we can expose that meat shelf and get that set up, and then we'll go ahead and throw a ham in here. Get ready to haul it down the hill. Let's see. So it's got all these little gatekeeper clips on there, which when I first got this pack, I was a little bit skeptical of. I was afraid they weren't going to be heavy duty enough, but I put this pack through some pretty rigorous days in the field, and I've never had any trouble at all with the pack or the clips. This is the Peregrine 3500 from Seek Outside. It's really nice to have a pack that you can use as a day pack and then also pack meat on, because I hunt a lot of times. I'm miles from camp, and I don't want to have to go back to camp to get my pack frame. Come back up, I can take a load out. So I'm gonna grab a ham and throw on here. Last year I carried out the bull that I shot on this pack, and I had this thing loaded. My loads were, well, one of them anyway, was probably over 100 pounds. This thing held up like a champ. So I'm just gonna take some of these extra straps that I had on there for strapping my bow on to the pack, and come around like this. Really cinch it down good. There we go. Now we can just loosen these up a little bit. Take the bag and hook it back up where it was. I went ahead and packed out that quarter that afternoon and hung the rest in trees so that we could come back the next day to get it. And Liz and Finn came up and helped me pack out the rest of it. Now I know some of you guys are gonna have questions about meat care, like how long can you leave quarters hanging in trees? How long do you have to get that meat out and back to camp and in a cooler? And this is something I'm gonna cover in a future video. And we're also gonna be covering home butchering. We're gonna go through everything, breaking down the front quarters, the back straps, the hind quarters, all the different cuts, and I'll even give you some cooking tips. So if you're not subscribed to the channel and you don't wanna miss out on that stuff, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell icon so you'll get a notification.
Poor Will. He fell in. Home stretch now.
Now, if you want to see how this hunt unfolded, keep tabs on the channel because we're going to have some hunting videos coming up real soon. I want to thank everybody that's signed up at Patreon because you guys are the ones that are helping to bring these videos to everyone. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.